This is the CitizenLink Report.
If you find our insights helpful, would you support our video efforts? Your gift of $25 or more goes a long ways. Covers the crew, lights, cameras, all that. Just click on Donate. Thanks from all of us. How exactly do you pray for a leader who, shall we say, doesn't exactly agree with your point of view? This is the CitizenLink Report. I'm Stuart Shepard along with our president, Tom Minnery. Hi, Tom.
Hello, Stuart.
This is a tricky subject and one that we don't talk about very often, but we thought it might be insightful to share some thoughts about the biblical perspective on praying for leaders who have a different point of view. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about. How do we talk about this?
Well, this is a serious time we're in. World problems are severe, and a lot of us probably think the president is not one who's likely to follow our viewpoint on things. Would he follow God's viewpoint? In other words, is it useful to pray for a president like this? That's the question.
Yeah, and should we? I mean, or many people, I'm sure, are praying against many of the president's initiatives, but how could we pray for him in an affirmative way?
Well, let's take a step back. Obviously, God can and does direct the hearts of anyone, any leader, at any time he wills it, even those who do not believe in godly principles. Now, I'm not saying our president doesn't believe in godly principles. I'm just saying that God, in the Old Testament, in the day of Daniel, through the means of directing Cyrus, Nebuchadnezzar, Darius, those secular despots back then, God handled them fairly well to affect his own views and affect his own desires for the Israelites. We saw that in the Old Testament time and time again.
Now, that's good, and it's good to share those Old Testament stories and to remember how God acted in that time. Are there examples in the modern era where God has worked perhaps in similar ways?
Well, there are, and we could talk about several examples. Let's talk about a relatively modern example, and the one that comes to mind is one of the most tumultuous, trying times of our country. It was the Civil War, and back in the summer of 1862, President Lincoln did not know what to do. He lost battle after battle. In fact, his lead general, McClellan, didn't want to fight very hard, and the Confederates were winning. And then it got really bad. General Lee, the head of the Confederate forces, splashed across the Potomac just 25 miles away from Washington with 39,000 troops. And Lincoln thought the end is near. And he had been thinking about something. He had been thinking that this is all about ending slavery. And he said, I made a vow to God, if I could get a victory, I would proceed with the Emancipation Proclamation. And this was on his mind because a number of clergymen had been coming to him and saying, it is God's will that you free the slaves. And President Lincoln was thinking about that and thinking, God is apparently talking to them. Would it be so irreverent of me if I were to suppose that our Creator would speak to me about it? After all, I'm the guy who can do something about it rather than the pastors. And that was September 13th, 1862. Later that day, some scouts from the Union forces found near those Confederate forces a copy of the battle plan.
Wow. The
entire battle plan that Lee was about to unfold as he was trying to take Washington. Well, they rushed it to McClellan's headquarters. The next day, that got McClellan thinking about actually fighting, and he did. He charged and he beat the Confederates back at the battle that we call Antietam on September 17th, 1862.
So he had an idea what they were going to do, and he moved before they could get to that.
And McClellan wasn't a brave sort. What he needed was the battle plan of the enemy. That's exactly what he got. And the battle ensued, and Lee was defeated, and that word got immediately back to Lincoln.
And he had to really be thinking about that once it got there.
Well, he did. In fact, the very next week, he convened his cabinet, and he told them something that really surprised him, because he doesn't talk like this. He said, "The Lord Almighty has settled this matter. I will issue the Emancipation Proclamation and free the slaves. God has decided this. And the cabinet said, Mr. President, excuse us, what? Because it wasn't like him. But he repeated what he said. And indeed, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation that took effect the following January 1st. And that was it. So God did apparently move in the midst of that battle and give Lincoln what he needed in order to do the thing that he thought was most important to do.
Now, in our day, we see people who tell us and recommend to us that we should pray, but not be personally involved in the matters that we deal with here at CitizenLink. Others are involved in the political spectrum, really don't spend enough time praying about it, I don't think. What's your idea about how to balance those two extremes?
Well, I think reading from what we know, what is inspired, we see in the book of Daniel that God does hold the heart of the king in the palm of his hand. And those kings may be believers, they may be unbelievers, they may be people who are sort of halfway there, hard to figure them out. But God can and does direct them as he wills, and we know that he responds to prayer. So yes, indeed, pray for righteousness, pray for our leaders, pray for them to act. Do not give up in expecting that God will maneuver human circumstances to accomplish his will.
Very good. Tom, thanks for those insights. Very helpful.
You're welcome.
And thank you for writing to us. We appreciate hearing from you. When you give us your thoughts, you may write us with your questions, your thoughts, your insights. You may write to us at mail@citizenlink.com. Remember to pray for our leaders, even the ones that we don't agree with, and pray for them in the manner that Tom just talked about. And remember, stand tall and be heard.